Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Good morning once again. Let's go around and say our names. Paul.
Larry.
Peter.
Steve.
Christopher. Ray. Tom. Dennis.
Pam.
Rich.
Hao.
No Blue.
Baruch.
Sandro.
Kay.
Babette.
Bob.
George.
Harlan. And Paul's up there putting out.
And Roger.
Good, yes. And Roger's out there.
This is the Buddha.
Roger's out there putting out Dharma. Take it away, Roger. Many of you know that, most of you know that Roger has been a member of our fellowship for some years. He's a retired and presumably emeritus professor. Is that true?
Yes, Professor Emeritus means that you have retired without any problems.
And Roger's also occasional writer in suit, known the Buddhism of Dharma Daddy. And today is this long-awaited talk on Christianity and Buddhism titled Christmas is for Buddhists too.
Yes, actually, the talk really isn't on Christianity and Buddhism. I mean, I could give that talk, but I thought it would be more interesting to look at what Christmas was really all about, because it really isn't a Christian feast originally. Before then, I should give people a quick update on how my health is doing. I'm halfway through the precautionary chemotherapy, which, if successful, will give me a good chance that there'll be no metastasis, and then I will be around for many years. I may be practically blind. My macular degeneration is progressing, but be here. I'm able to speak out of what I've learned up until then. So I appreciate everyone's concern for my health. I've had no major problems with the chemo. A couple of things have gone wrong, but nothing major. So, and I'm wearing a Santa hat to. I suppose you all want to see what's under there. Yes, this is what happens when chemo. Some people think it looks butch, and they'd like me to keep it this way. So I don't know. My oncologist is from Thailand, and he says, "Oh, you look like a monk." So then I went, Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddha. Oh yes, that's very good. So how does it happen that a Santa is able to do all that he does? Well, according to Dharma Master Tonwan, when we attain to the Dharma Kaya, the Dharma body, we spontaneously begin to manifest transformation of bodies instantaneously and simultaneously in all worlds where they are needed, without departing from the Dharma body. This, he says, is like the sun, which, while remaining in the heavens, is reflected in 10,000 rivers and lakes. So that's how he does it. Okay. As to the substance of the talk, let me put this out so I can see it. It comes up again. It comes up every year, but it seems to come up a little more this year than last times. Whether this is a Christian holiday and whether we should put Christ back into Christmas and this become secular. And because I think that the issue now is that the president, or should I call him the occupant of the White House, is officially a born-again Christian, and he has continued the tradition, which apparently was only started under Clinton, to send out cards saying Happy Holidays, not Merry Christmas. And so the Christians are saying it's getting out of hand, we need to put Christ back into Christmas. The assumption being that it's not originally a Christian feast. It's also Happy Honda Days, I think, now. I've seen that's something, a different approach. So the first part of the talk will be just a quick history of this, because I think it's quite a fascinating history of what the feast is all about. And it is not a Christian feast originally. It is a Northern Hemisphere European feast of the winter solstice, which we say today is on December 21st, but it was on the 25th because the calendar's been messed around with a lot, so it's the same thing, really. And this winter solstice feast goes back, as far as we know, to prehistoric times. It makes sense that there should be some kind of feast then, because before the solstice, the days are getting shorter, the nights are getting longer, the sun is getting weaker, and it appears that maybe it will keep on going, and there will be perpetual night and cold and darkness, and then we find that it reverses itself, and that the sun gets stronger again, and the days get longer. So this was noted and celebrated, and there was some kind of assistance, as it were, going on by the lighting of fires to go along with the rebirth of the sun. Scholars of religion used to call this imitated magic, because they said, well, of course, those primitives, they didn't know what was going on, and they felt that if you lit a fire in the physical world, it would affect the spiritual world. Isn't that strange? They would be so dumb. I mean, those people back there were so dumb, it's amazing that there's any humans left. How could they have survived? Well, of course, they were not dumb. What was going on, I think, is that they realized the interdependence of the invisible world, what they would call in Celtic tradition the other world, and the visible world, the spiritual world and the material world. And in Buddhism, we have the experience that the mind and the body are interdependent. We can't see the mind, although we know the mind is there, as if we see smoke, we know there is fire. We don't see the fire, but we know for certain there must be fire if there is smoke. So then when we see a being which has a mind, it acts in certain ways, and we know that there is a mind, even though we can't see that. Even when they're aliens, in the early Star Trek, they'd go off and these aliens would kind of die, and then Bones would say, he's dead, Jim. And you'd know, they're aliens. And we realize that the body and the mind interact, and that they are interdependent. We can affect the mind by the body, and we can affect the body by the mind. So I think that was what was happening. We have some kind of record of the feast in Northern Europe, because although the people didn't write anything, down. When the Christians came, they recorded things, and when the Romans came, they recorded things. We're not sure whether they got it right, but at least it sounds reasonable. And the feast was called Yule, Y-U-L-E. It's not certain where this word comes from. It might come from the old German word Jol, J-O-L, which means the turning of a wheel. So it's the turning of the wheel of the year. And I like that explanation better than the other suggestion that it comes from the Anglo-Saxon Jul, G-E-O with a bar over it, L, which means the feast. I mean, so, we're having a feast. A feast? What sort of feast? The feast. Oh, that feast, yes. Now, it seems to me more that it would be the turning of the wheel, the turning of the year. And what would happen is people would go out and find a large log, the Yule log, which was to be kept burning for 12 days, for the 12 months of the year, which were about to come, and then it would be kept burning. All the sparks and the energy from this was intended to assist the energy of the crops and of the cattle as we went into the rest of the year. So that's why we have Yule logs and light a fire at Christmas. I was channel surfing last night because I hadn't much to do and I didn't feel like much energy. It was really almost nothing worthwhile on the TV these days. But there was one channel which was entirely a picture of logs burning and some carols, and it was the whole night. I come back today, there it is again. Well, that's a very ancient tradition, and now you can have the logs burning without the actual trouble of going out and finding a log and burning it yourself. And of course, the 12 days of Christmas, we're familiar with that. In the Roman Empire, the equinox, which was on the 25th of December, as the calendar was then, was celebrated in a rather dramatic way as the rebirth of the sun, the day of the rebirth of the invincible sun, and was surrounded with Saturnalia, Saturn being the god of plenty, and it was very similar to what would happen in Yule when the people would be inside their houses with the winter outside and the demons outside, and you had the bright fire inside, and you ate a lot of food, and yes, had a lot of sex, because you were trying to help the productivity of the rest of the year. So light and abundance, and also sex, which seems to have dropped out of favour, at least in the public eye, were the main features of this. Certain of the Romans were followers of what we call Mithraism. The Persian god Mithras, M-I-T-H-R-A-S, was associated with the sun, and maybe being the sun god himself, and he was a culture transformer. By the ritual slaying of a bull in a cave, a cosmic bull in a cosmic cave, he brought about the transformation of the culture from hunting and gathering to agriculture, and the product of this was bread and wine. So in the Mithraeum, in the chapel to Mithras, which was made to look like an underground cave, even if it wasn't an underground cave, there would be the ritual consumption of bread and wine. There are other in the Christian tradition done a similar thing, and of course there was some kind of resonance between these two ideas. It's almost a historical accident, although it's much more complex than that in fact it was Christianity rather than Mithraism that took over the Roman Empire, and we might still be celebrating the birthday of Mithras and saying we've got to put Mithras back into the Mithras feast because he's gone too secular. Now we're saying no, put Christ back into this feast. Mithraism may not have entirely disappeared. The slaying of the bull by Mithras is depicted as the bull is coming down like this, and Mithras is bending over and slaying the bull from the front to the back like this. And this is exactly the most revered and honoured way to kill the bull in La Festa Brava, in the bullfight. And the bullfight, as we call it in English, is of course not really about killing a bull. There's much easier ways to kill a bull than that. So it's about this, it's something cosmic is going on, and the chief matador wears a suit of lights, so it's associated with this, the sun. So there still might be a lot of Mithraism drifting about, but it's not called that anymore. However, the Christians eventually decided to take this over. Christians did not celebrate the birthday of Christ, the nativity of Christ, at the beginning. It was Easter was the main feast, a resurrection, and actually the earliest traditions of Christianity have no mention of the birth of Christ. The earliest of the Gospels, as we have them in the Bible today, the New Testament today, is the Gospel of Mark, and Jesus simply appears on the scene like a Hebrew prophet, and he speaks extremely much like a Hebrew prophet. He gets angry, he gets petulant, he gets sad, and everything happens immediately. The Greek word euthus, immediately, is constantly coming up in that. It's a very craggy kind of gospel, completely different picture of Jesus than we get in a later tradition. And then Matthew and Luke have traditions about the birth of Jesus, which are not entirely compatible, though they can be made to be compatible. Interestingly, it concludes one of the accounts includes shepherds who come to worship the birth of Jesus. Shepherds came to worship at the birth of Mithras. So there's something going on here. I mean, it's not too clear what's going on. It's a bit murky still, but scholars are convinced that there's some kind of resonance between these two things. So it wasn't until at least the year 300 in North Africa, and then not until 350 there was a definition by the Vatican of the celebration of the birth of Jesus. And when the Christian Church decided to celebrate it on the December 25th, they made no pretense that this was the birthday of Jesus in historical time. They admitted they didn't know. Nobody had made a record of it for some reason. It's possible that it happened in the springtime, because if you're going to have shepherds abiding in the field, they're not going to be in the middle of the snow, are they? There's going to be something a little bit warmer than that. But whenever it was, they picked, it's quite clear that the Christian Church picked December 25th, the rebirth of the Son, S-U-N, to be the birth of the Son, S-O-N. and the birth of Mithras. Mithras at that time was not so popular, so he was going into the shadows or into the bull ring or something, and the other tradition was coming up. So then the Saturnalia were kind of reduced, but they still went on, and letting it all hang out around Christmas time is still quite a tradition. When the Christian Church did this, it's worth putting a little footnote as to what was going on here. Some people would think, well, they were just kind of opportunistic or something, or Christmas is really a pagan festival, and we'll see in a little bit this was the way that the Puritans thought of it. But actually, there is a good theological reason for this. If you start from the proposition that Jesus is the incarnation of God, and that the incarnation occurred, according to Irenaeus, not by the degradation of divinity or the descent of the divinity into the humanity, but by the lifting up of the humanity into the divinity, then you have a theological position in which the whole purpose of the Christian life is the lifting up of the earth and the humans and everything in the earth into the divine. At the end of the service of lessons and carols at King's College, Cambridge, which is now transmitted live, and I always try to listen to that, because that's the one thing I miss about England, is those wonderful services in the cathedrals and the chapels. The Church of England may not be too good on doctrine, but it's wonderful on music. So at the end of that, the dean, who turns out to be a Scots now, to my great surprise, he talks about people sharing in the divine life, that we may share in the divine life. And this is something which is, if I were to give an extended talk on Christianity and Buddhism, or what Christianity is really all about, this is the point I would emphasize, because it is very much, it is quite foundational to the Christian tradition, and it is missed by so many Christians, and I've hardly ever heard a sermon on this, as certainly in the Western Church. In the Eastern Church, Greek and Russian churches, you will hear sermons on this, but not so much in the Western Church. That the idea is that, as Saint Athanasius says, God became a human that humans might become divine. And in the Eastern tradition, the end of the Christian life is called divinization. In the Western Church, it's called sanctification, which is supposed to mean the same thing, but doesn't have the same hit with it. So then it is not. It is perfectly in a line with this that festivals already occurring of the earth, such as Christmas and Easter. The word Easter, of course, is an ancient Anglo-Saxon word meaning dawn or springtime, rebirth of the rebirth. That these will be taken up into the Christian tradition, and it is therefore also quite natural that someone like Our Lady of Guadalupe would be an Aztec princess who's been taken up into the Christian tradition. So that was just an extended footnote to let you see that it wasn't just an accident that the Church chose this, since it didn't know when the time was. So then, what happens in our country, in the USA? Well, Christmas was being celebrated with with a reduced form of the Saturnalia or that kind of thing in England until the Puritans took over. Now, when I did my history of in high school in England, I learned that the Puritans were nasty people and that the Royalists were nice people. And we let off fireworks on the 5th of November to celebrate the defeat of the nasty people, the Puritans. I then came to the US and I realized that over here people are told the Puritans are the nice people and the Royalists are the nasty people, and we set off fireworks on the 4th of July to celebrate the defeat of the Royalists. Okay, I can handle it either way. The thing was, when they got rid of the king and the Puritans took over, the Puritans had a theological proposition derived from John Calvin, which was an attempt to purify the Christian church of what it thought were the abuses of the of previous ages, and it did not find it easy to go along with this principle of divinization. It made a separation between the body and the mind, and the flesh and the spirit, and it emphasized the spirit or soul and tried to put down the flesh as evil. I won't go into remarks about what I think was going on there, but that really was the heart of the Reformation of the church in the West in the 16th century. The Eastern church has never been affected by this. It looks at the Western church and thinks, what are you doing? In the 16th century you try to get rid of the images. Well, we went through all that in the 6th century in the East, and we figured it out. We're going to have images. So what are you doing all this stuff? So the Eastern Christians often think Western Christians are really very strange. But the heart of the Reformation of the Christian church in the West was, I think, this controversy over whether or not the flesh and the earth are still being divinized and taken up into God, or whether that only happened once in Jesus. And this is a gross oversimplification of the Reformation. I studied it in my undergraduate career for 2 years. So this gross, but I think it gets to the point that the extreme Protestants wanted to say that the incarnation happened only once in Jesus, and then the sacramental structure of the church had to go, and anything that smacked of the earth or the flesh or of paganism had to go also. So when the Puritans took over England, they abolished all festivals, including Christmas. And they got rid of art from churches and so forth. And the English didn't like this. And after a bit they said, look, we either want the king back or Christmas back or something. This is not working. And eventually they got both. And the Puritans were told that if they wanted to leave for the plantations in the New World, they would be welcome to go, and that's where they went. So then, of course, they weren't the only people to come over here. In Episcopalian and Roman Catholic parts of the countries, settled by the English the Episcopalians, let's say in Williamsburg, and then Spanish and Mexicans in other parts. Christmas was celebrated in the old way, but in New England, no Christmas. And if you had the temerity to celebrate, I mean, you go to church and they give a sermon, but if you had the temerity to celebrate Christmas in New England, you were subject to fine of 5 shillings. I don't know quite how what we were today, but 5 shillings, I think, back then was a bunch. It was a lot, so you didn't want to be found out. And so that was that. Christmas was forbidden. But people are people everywhere, and even in America, they said, well, the Puritan thing is okay for a bit, but after we want some fun, we just can't go on with this. So the Puritan influence began to wane, and then they said, well, now how are we, if we're Protestant, how are we going to celebrate Christmas? So they looked to the Catholics and the Protestants, and they took over some things from them, and then they had services which was somewhat like they were having, and then some of the everyday stuff was brought back too, with the eating and the feasting and so forth. But by this time things had become a bit Victorian, and people were a bit nervous about actually enjoying themselves, although they were sort of not as bad as Puritans. But then they thought, well, maybe the children, it's okay for the children. So Christmas became a children's feast, and you could give gifts to children, and you could look after them and so forth. And there was a kind of time when children were idealized, children were innocent, and they came from God, and they were quite different than ordinary people. And then I think it was actually Macy's that decided, oh look, people are giving gifts to each other. Supposing we could get them to buy stuff, wouldn't that be good? So I keep forgetting who it is who said the business of America is business. I think it was Grover Cleveland or Bunn. Who was it, you think?
Coolidge.
Oh, okay. Was it Calvin Coolidge? It seems a long sentence for him. Anyhow, it was somebody, well, maybe it was Calvin Coolidge. Whoever said the business of America is business was really extremely insightful, because it is and has remained that way, it seems. It's one way we're distinguished from other cultures, I think. And so Christmas became a time of buying things, and the St. Nicholas and St. Claus were adapted and became the Santa Claus, and then it became a festival for that of abundance for everybody, and then but it was still a kind of Christian kind of feeling. So then I think it was the Jews first started, well, let's see, the Christians are having so much fun, and can we think of anything? So sort of the Jews went looking around in the attic where they'd got all these things left over from Auntie Sadie and Uncle Moshe, and said, oh look, here's Hanukkah. Oh, this is about the continuing of light in the middle of winter. This would be great. So it wasn't that Hanukkah hadn't been celebrated, but it wasn't very important. It was brought into importance and made a part of this. So then when we began to be embarrassed about saying Christmas because there was Hanukkah, which happens to be this evening, it comes to be almost the same time this year. And so we said happy holidays. And so that's how we got where we are, that we say happy holidays. And then the idea that you put Christ back into Christmas because that is the real meaning of it, I don't think is the people who do that, say that, are not doing their history too well. So having seen that, then I think that we can say that the feast is really a feast of the winter solstice, which we can even feel in San Francisco, where the weather never really gets to be bad. I mean, people complain here when it's 45 degrees and raining. When I lived in Wisconsin, if it was above zero, you rejoiced. So that's different. I said, oh wow, it's above zero. To take all our clothes off, it's so warm. But we can still feel that. So I would suggest that the real meaning of Christmas is this winter solstice, and I would say it has 3 elements, which is that of light and of abundance, and of wake up. beginning of the year. I do that light, abundance, wake up, because it spells LAW, so you can take it away with you so you can remember what I was talking about. The light we see in the Christmas lights and the Yule log and all that kind of thing. And I'm pointing out these things as ways that they can help us to be mindful of the teaching of Buddha. So light is quite important in a Buddhist tradition. It's spoken of all the time in all the traditions. There's one passage in the Pali Sutras where all the deities are hanging around having a picnic or something, and they see this light coming on the horizon, and it's an immense light, and they said, "Who is this deity? It seems like he may be more powerful than we are. Who is this with so much? We've never seen so much light." And of course, it's the Buddha, and he comes to teach them the Dharma. The Buddha is frequently pictured as having a halo or an aureole, which I interpret as being a way of representing the shining mind, the pure mind of the Buddha. In the Pali tradition, it's called Chitta Prabhasa, or shining mind. Then it's found in the Dzogchen tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, where it's called the mind of clear light. And then in the Yogacara tradition of Mahayana, it's called the wisdom of the great mirror, which simply reflects the way things are rather than distorts by projecting something onto reality which isn't actually there. And when a person has attained or has even begun to attain to the knowledge that they have the light of the Buddha within them, it begins to shine out. Not physically, but you can tell the difference if you see someone like the Dalai Lama. He appears to shine, not so much on the TV because it's a physical, but you must see the person in person, I think, and you can feel that there's a light there. This is in other traditions too, when Moses went up, he came down, his face was so shining, he had to cover it over and so forth. And the feeling that a person of some spiritual attainment appears to shed light, though it is not a physical light, but it can be painted as that. So we can look into ourselves and we can find the source of light. When we see the Christmas lights, we can say, that reminds me of the light of my own Buddha mind. Then, for abundance and the giving of gifts and so forth, we see shopping. And we see shopping getting into a frenzy. And people giving gifts to everybody, and then they're very upset if they haven't given the gifts to the people they should have given, and then the people who get the gifts are upset because it wasn't the gift they wanted, and they've got to go the next day to change it at the store and so forth. And it's all supposed to be really, really good. But it's very important. I suppose you saw the clip that I saw on the news of people storming the doors of Walmart, rushing in and trampling over people. Some woman lost her wig and so forth. I think it was a woman. If it had been a drag queen, there would have been something to pay for losing a wig. But and they're rushing in to get this physical thing. And we're so stuck on physical things now. We think physical things can give us a happiness. And the trick is, they can. If I buy a new car or a new iPod or a new something else, it will give me wonderful happiness for a time. And then after a shorter or longer time, it's, oh well, I want another one. It's gone. Now, can we stand at the doors of the temple of the Dharma think of the treasure of the Dharma, and do we stand in front of it like those people on the TV commercial? I think it's now for Mervyn's. I love TV commercials, by the way. I hate TV, but I love the commercials because they say so much about what are our true values. And they're standing in front of this door saying, open, open, open. And then finally it opens. Do we have that intensity when we want to hear the teaching of the Dharma, to something new that will really help us, not something that will be nice for a bit, but we'll get to the root of why we are not entirely happy, not as happy as we should be, or suffering, and then we'll cut the root of suffering. Are we at least as urgent as those people who are trampling over people to get an iPod, or to say open, 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 so they can get a new thing from Mervyn's? All right, and then finally, wake up. I put it as wake up. Because this was actually something that was said by Dogen Zenji. It relates to the Christmas as a time of the new year, because the winter solstice, in some cultures it was, and in some cultures I think still is, the time of the new year. It makes sense to say the new year begins when the sun becomes stronger again, or the perceived strength of the sun becomes stronger. 1st of January is a really odd time to begin at the new year. There's not really much reason to do it there, but it's happens the way we are doing it. It's the newness of the new year. It's also a part of the Christian tradition that I think anybody can relate to, whether they're Christian or not. The birth of a new baby. We always say new baby, don't we? As if there were old babies. Actually was. Lao Tzu, according to the Chinese tradition, Lao Tzu was in his mother's womb for 70 years before he was born, and he was an old baby. That was a long-suffering mother. That's why he was called Lao Tzu, or old boy. That's one of the ways of interpreting his name. Anyhow, a new baby, we can all relate to the freshness, as long as it's a healthy baby, of course, the freshness and the amazement that this baby has, that what's all this stuff, where am I, what's going on, what's happening, and we can see that here's the new beginning, the potential, and it should remind us of the beginner's mind. Shun Liu, who founded the Zen Center in San Francisco, only wrote one book, and it was a small book, but it was a wonderful book. It was all he needed to write. And he called it Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. A beginner's mind is Sho Shin. Shin is translated as mind, but it's the heart and the mind. It's suggested that we should always translate that mind and heart, or heart and mind, because the character Shin in Chinese and Japanese, it means both the thinking and the feeling. We tend to separate head from heart. East Asian cultures have a problem with that. They don't quite understand what that really means. So the mind and heart, the whole of us, the whole of our thinking, feeling, and then Sho is the word to begin. Hajime, if you've done any martial arts, they pronounce it a different way, it's the same character. It literally means the first cutting of some cloth. Then we pull the character apart. That means here you have some cloth and you want to make something out of it. And before you make anything out of it, you have this infinite potential. You can make anything out of it that will be, that the amount of material you have will fit. And then as soon as you cut, you've made a decision and the options are restricted. The event horizon has collapsed. And then it's different. But just before you cut, you have this potential, this infinite potential. So that's the mind and heart in the moment of the infinite potential, that what will happen next could be almost anything. And that brightness, that liveliness of the mind and heart is what is being talked of in beginner's mind, Shoshin. And what are we waking up to? But we're waking up to the Buddha nature in all of us, as Ajit Singh never tired of reminding us over the fall retreat, we are all Buddhas. And so when we see it this way, we connect to the Sangha. So what I've tried to do is to connect light as a way of reminding us of the Buddha, the abundance as a way of reminding us of the Dharma, and the wake up, as the Dogen would say, as a way of reminding us of the Sangha. Just one more thing on the wake up thing. Zen Master Dogen would disturb the sepulchral silence of the Zendo occasionally with a shout, "Wake up!" And in fact that is the whole of the Buddhist tradition. And they may still have it available. Mount Tremper Zen Monastery in Zen Mountain Monastery in Mount Tremper, New York. I have one of these and they may still have it. It has a coffee mug with "Wake up!" on the side, which reminds us every time we have coffee what the Dhamma is all about. Well, I thank you for your attention. I think we have some time for questions. Yes.
You were mentioning about the Yule log again.
Pardon? About?
When you were mentioning about the Yule log in tradition, you had said that they burned the log. Was it with candles? I was missing. And what do you do with that for the year? I sort of.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, they. I don't think they lit it with candles. They lit it with. It was the fire in the main house, the long house in the old Nordic tradition, and the idea was to keep it burning for 12 nights or for 12 days or 12 nights, and then each of the sparks and the sparks and the flames and so forth were the strongly it burned, and if you could keep it that would help the productivity of the year.
Did they do anything special with the ashes? Save them for that you're aware of any?
I don't know of any. I read up a little bit on this and I didn't see any mention of what they did with the ashes, but that's an interesting question. I might try and look into that, see if I find anything about it.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Roger, I've talked with you before with the idea that the Three Kings Magi tradition in the Gospel of Matthew is perhaps a connection between Jesus specifically and the Buddhist tradition, although I realize it's often associated with Zoroastrian tradition. But let me just ask a more broader question. Do you see, and I'm sure you thought about it, do you see a direct connection between Jesus and the Buddhist tradition, either geographical or idea transmitted?
There's no direct connection. Nothing has come up yet that I know of that shows really what is going on, that you could say, well, for sure this is happening. What we need is some kind of textual linking or archaeological linking or something. And what we have is things that look very much the same. E.J. Thomas, in his book on the life of the Buddha as legend and history, which was one of the classic books, which we don't read too much now, but it's one of the classic books on the life of the Buddha, has an appendix on the parallels between the life of Jesus in the Gospels and the life of the Buddha in the Sutras. And we now know more about the life of Jesus because we have all the other texts from the Nag Hammadi and other apocryphal texts which were suppressed, but they've been discovered again. Largely, we know there was a lot more going on in the life of Jesus that was often very, very similar to what the Buddha is doing. The life of Jesus is very similar to that of the Hellenistic heroes, like Apollonius of Tyana, or the life of Hermes Trismegistus, and of course the Mithras and all kinds of dying and rising gods. And a lot of the ideals are the ideals of the Bodhisattva. But the only exact lineage we have is much later, and that's between in the Christian tradition there are two saints, Balaam and Josaphat, and it has been shown by a sure textual lineage that they go back to the life of the Buddha. Josaphat is a corruption of Bodhisattva, and it came through Islam. But that's much later. So it's still up in the air as to what is going on. And these notions that Jesus went to India and preached, there's also notions he went to Iceland and then ended up in Japan, and there's a tomb of Jesus in Japan, there's a tomb of Jesus in Srinagar. But there's nothing much we can do about this. The only extended treatment of this comes through the mediumship of Elizabeth Clare Prophet, who has 4 books on this, and take those at whatever value you would like. Do we have any time for more questions, or are we out of time?
Go ahead.
I recently came across the notion that in the Middle East, like Iraq and Iran, the Persian area, even prehistorically, there were these deposits of like natural gas and fuel, oil, just bubbling up out of the earth, and that oftentimes that would catch fire either through lightning or something. So very, very primitive people thought this was like supernatural and that they worshipped the light. And a lot of the Persian tradition is about worshiping light. And I just thought that was an interesting beginning of it.
Yes, as far as I know, humans. It took a long time for humans to find out how to make fire, and they found it. And it came through lightning striking something, or through what you're talking about, and then they would try to keep it. So the idea was the preservation of the fire, and that is most obviously done by the Parsis, a Zoroastrian tradition, in which in their temples they attempt to have an eternal fire going, and also the Agnihotra, which is a very, very elaborate Vedic ceremony, which has been chronicled in detail by Fritz Stahl when he was a professor at the University of California, Berkeley. He has a big book on it, and he has also a video. And in the Agnihotra, of course, the word Agni it means fire, from ignition, and so we have the same word in English. There is fire is used which has been preserved, and so we kind of lose the tradition when we can have big lighters and so forth. We don't realize how extraordinary it is that we can make a fire. And without it, we would die. Well, we wouldn't do well, at least. We wouldn't die completely, but we wouldn't do well. We couldn't have hamburgers or something.
Well, thanks, Roger.
All right.
I think I'll always remember your description of the baby and for the wake up. And now when I see the baby Jesus on Christmas, I will have that.
It's actually said in the Lao Tzu, can you be like the little child who has not yet learned to smile, the 没孩子, because learning, we have to learn to smile. We have to learn that if we do this, if we lift the corners of the mouth, we get milk. So.
Thanks, Skip. Are there any announcements?
Paul.
I'm host today, and Cass, who's the usual host, wasn't able to come, but he supplied cookies and other sort of baked goods, and so they're all out there, and there's tea, hot water for tea, and so as usual, please wash up your cup and be careful about your friends. And there's a Dharma bowl, and we appreciate your support, $8 or more or less as you can. And there's also a sign-up sheet, and if you want to be get the newsletter or be on our mailing list. And there's a list there of all the people on our mailing list, because we're going to do a directory, and if you want to be in the directory, you can circle your name, and so that you could also write a brief description if you have a service that you provide that you would like people in Sangha to know, then write that down.
Keith?
If you're interested in a triple header today, as Roger said, Hanukkah starts this afternoon, and Michael Lerner's congregation in Beit Tikkun is holding Hanukkah celebrations at 3 p.m. Today in the Mission Synergy School. I think it's near 25th and Valencia. With potluck.
Also, we have a potluck here over at Bob's.
I'm hosting a potluck today, 2 to 7. I've got information here if you need. I sort of said there's a South Asian theme if you want, but come. Abundance will happen, so come if you're available. But if you can wear Indian clothes or bring Indian food, that's nice.
And a reminder that our talks are available on the internet at the GBF website, gaybuddhist.org.
Oh, and I should say that one of the nice things about coming to GBF is all the hugs I get. But if you have a cold or something like that, please hug me in the virtual sense, because I'm undergoing chemotherapy, as I said, and I may be more vulnerable to infection than normally. Thank you.
Okay, and also the directory we're trying to accumulate is a work in progress. We noticed a couple of weeks ago that the snail mail address isn't in the directory, even though it's in the data bank. It didn't get printed out. So, we might, you might, if you want to be in the directory, there's a printout, circle your name, and there's double space between each entry, and you might make it clear what your snail mail address is if you want that included in the directory. So this will probably take several months to get together, but be patient with us. The steering committee meeting is in 2 weeks, and some people on the steering committee want to step down, so we need some new people to step up. And the steering committee currently meets 4 times a year for an hour after the Sunday meetings, and during the year there's occasional emails that we send to each other, but it's kind of an essential function of the Sangha, but it's not that time consuming. So people who dread having another commitment in their life should just realize that time-wise it's fairly minimal. Okay, Roger, can you think of a closing for us if we stand up and explain?
All right. By the merits of this practice, may all beings experience light of the Buddha nature. May they experience the abundance of the treasures of the Dharma and wake up to the nature of reality. Nam-myoho-myoho-butsu, Nam-myoho-myoho-butsu, Nam-myoho-myoho-butsu. Thank you for your attention.
Go ahead. Now we'll all go caroling.
Yes. Buddha loves me, this I know. There is a hymn like that, actually. Yes, there really is. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.